Let me tell you about music from the adventures of Pete and Pete.
When showrunners Will McRobb and Chris Viscardi were pulling together a little show for Nickelodeon called The Adventures of Pete and Pete, their original plan was to ask Connecticut-based jangle rock band Miracle Legion to do the music for the show. However, at the time, the band were facing a multitude of issues from their label. Due to that and some other personal things going on with members, the band was facing dissolvement. This didn't stop frontman Mark Mulcahy, drummer Scott Boutier, and bassist Dave McCaffrey from moving forward with the two and make music for the show. The songs they made not only acted as a great backbeat for the show in question, but were a fantastic showcase of how tight they could still perform as a unit and wrote some bops in the process that I'm going to talk about today. I'm talking about the soul album from the self-proclaimed band that lives in your TV, Polaris, music from the adventures of Pete and Pete.
As I stated in my Presidents of the United States of America discography review, and my classic breakdown of They Might Be Giants' Lincoln, and my classic breakdown of Soul Coughing's El Oso, there were pockets of my childhood where what I was watching on TV influenced and shaped my music taste because some genuine bops were being showcased back then, or in the case of today's album, were created specifically for a TV show. And the band Polaris pulled together a great batch of tunes to soundtrack what I would argue is one of the most unique kids shows that was being funded by a big studio. I love The Adventures of Pete and Pete, but this video is not going to touch on the show all that intimately. I would highly recommend watching the show, though. If you want a video to talk about the show itself, I would look at Pushing Up Rose's video she did on the show. It's a great look back, and part of that has to do with the acting and the weird storylines and the crazy characters, in hindsight, some of the cool cameos they had in the instance of Michael Stipe and Kate Pearson in a couple of episodes. But the soundtrack backing the show itself was also well-crafted, full stop. They have this inherent tightness at their core that they channel so very well on these tunes. You know, the music itself, it's a very reminiscent of where the alternative scene was in like the early 90s around the time of the grunge explosion. You know, it's a little less grungy and a little more jangle pop. It's a little more college rock, as it were. You know, it's got really reverb-soaked guitars. You know, the drums have an airiness to them, and the vocalist kind of has this whimpering, nasally snarl that kind of feels like a hodgepodge of Tom York a la Pablo Honey and Chris Ballou from the Presidents of the United States of America. You know, he's got a little bit of twang, but he uses his falsetto in a really fun way. The band themselves have this good ability to craft tunes, whether it's a great groove like on She Is Staggering, or on Everywhere, or Ashamed of the Story I Told, which is sort of the closest I feel like the album gets to being a little grungy. The lead guitar on that song has this vibe all its own that definitely sort of cements what the story may have needed at the time when it came to actually pulling the music itself for use in the show, because the songs themselves were rarely used in full. They would just use these pockets that sort of fit the emotion that needed to be enhanced with the music, which is sort of the magic of this record if you grew up with the show and you never listened to it, because there you hear these pockets of songs and then you hear the full context of what it sounds like in the full song, and it fits like a fucking glove. You know, obviously the first song of the album is the theme song of the show, and the full song fits that wistfulness that the song itself reaches. You know, the title, the 30 seconds they use for the show is just an abridged version with a little bit of the solo, the first verse, the catchy-ass chorus, which this album, speaking of catchy choruses, there are a slew of them on here. But I love how each of these pocket moments that you may have heard sound great when heard in full. You know, She Is Staggering's groove sounds like something you would hear in like a wistful part of the show that the whole song just encapsulates perfectly, complete with some Super Mario RPG-ass MIDI flute solo. It's a moment that does sound a little dated, I admit, but it's still charming to hear all these years later. Or the fact that Summer Baby is from the episode where Little Pete gets a guitar and he forms a band with members of his community, like one of his teachers and the postman, and the song itself that they wrote in the show is Summer Baby, and it's a great fucking tune with another catchy-ass chorus. You know, the album itself tries to tie into these thematics of space with having the space mission in the opening, and then having these samples, intro songs like Saturnine and Coronado 2. There's a hidden track at the end of the Monsters Loose that is snippets of the Apollo 11 space radio calls with each other. You know, they go for this spacey feel, and I feel like the instrumentation with it sort of lends itself to that spacey vibe. The songwriting itself, while trying to hit some emotional chords or some thematics, do have a lot of mystery sort of surrounding them. You know, when looking into what these songs are written about, like Waiting for October, absolute bop. Love that song. Probably my second favorite song on the album. I think the chorus of that song is so fucking catchy with the at the end of the Waiting for October. So good. The band themselves don't completely know what it's about anymore, which is hilarious. It's kind of a mystery. And that kind of embodies a handful of the songs on the record when it comes to the songwriting. Sure, at some points they're trying to reach some emotional core, like on She Is Staggering, or on Saturnine. They're trying to reach some sort of emotional connection, whether it's with talking about somebody feeling for somebody else, or somebody having lost feelings for somebody else. Hey Sandy sort of acts as a good cement for a lot of those lyrical themes, because it itself is also about a relationship. Or in the case of Ivy Boy, trying to tell a story with 3 different characters. You know, there are pockets where they're trying to make sense. But even like Coronado 2, does anyone even really know what that song is about? But does it really matter? Does it encapsulate a mood regardless? And the answer more often than not is yes. I really like this record, and it was really fun to sort of listen to and respin and reacclimate myself to it. It's an album with an interesting story as well, with the story of Polaris. You know, the band themselves, the band Polaris, it actually has pretty much become a real band at this point, because Miracle Legion, they're something of a piece of the past, whereas this band, they even dropped something a couple of years back, a little single to sort of celebrate their existence as a piece of pop culture history. And I feel like this is one of those records where if you know, you know. If you like it, you like it. And if you don't, I would highly implore you check it out. If you like a lot of what the alternative rock scene was doing in the early 90s, I would recommend this soundtrack of songs. It's better than any soundtrack to a kid's show has any right to be. And the band themselves, I feel like, recognize that, because after the show was canceled, there was a label that put out this album on a soundtrack, and it's even something that gets re-released every so often. You know, a couple years back they re-released it on vinyl. And the band themselves reformed about 20 years after the show was canceled to play more shows and put out a little single as the band Polaris. And they still had a strong showing. It's a testament to some magic that happened in the early 90s when they were asked to do this soundtrack. And it's sort of an interesting instance where something fake eventually became something very real. And I appreciate that about it. And I really like this album, and I hope that you check it out if you like this sort of stuff. But did you like this video? Did you like this reflection on the music from the album, the music of The Adventures of Pete and Pete? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you did like this video, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. And special thanks to my patrons. If you want to join their ranks to get early access to content, exclusive content, or to help drive the community, it's linked in the description. I've got polls that are live right now for July. Rachel's Game Corner next month is going live on there this weekend. I'm going to go, though. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Rack. You guys have videos, lives, and situations. And I'll see you another day.